The lobby of the Ashgrove Inn smelled like cedar and old money, and Renata Oseboting had barely stepped through the doors before the man behind the reception desk looked up and decided he didn't like what he saw. She wasn't dressed poorly. That's the thing people always assume. She was wearing a camel wool coat, good boots, her hair pulled back neat. She had a reservation confirmation on her phone, and a reason to be there that was bigger than anyone in that lobby could have guessed. But none of that mattered to the man behind the desk, whose name tag said Regional Manager. Sterling Voss, and who had spent apparently the better part of 20 years deciding on site who belonged in places like this and who didn't. "Can I help you?" Sterling Voss said it the way some people say it, not like a question, like a warning. Renata walked to the desk. She smiled the way her mother had taught her to smile when the world wanted to make her feel small. Chin level, eyes steady. The smile that doesn't ask for anything. "I have a reservation," she said. "Oseboting, 2 nights." Sterling Voss looked down at his computer, looked back up at her, looked at the coat, the boots, the suitcase she'd rolled in herself because the doorman hadn't moved to help her. "I'm not seeing it," he said. "It was booked 3 weeks ago," Renata said. "Confirmation number is right here." She held out her phone. He didn't look at it. "Our system had an update last week," he said. "Some reservations didn't carry over. You'd need to rebook. I have a confirmation number. That doesn't guarantee availability." She held his gaze for a moment. 3 seconds, maybe 4 fists. The kind of pause where both people know exactly what's happening and one of them is betting the other won't say it out loud. Renata didn't say it out loud. "Not yet. Could you check again?" she said. Sterling Voss sighed. The theatrical kind, the kind that says you're wasting my time. He typed something, stared at the screen. "I'm not finding anything under that name." He looked up. "We do have a motel about 15 minutes east on the highway. Clean place. Might suit better." The lobby was not empty. There was a couple by the fireplace, mid-60s, matching fleece vests, a young man with a laptop at the side table, 2 women near the staircase having a quiet conversation that had just gotten quieter. They were all watching, the way people watch when they don't want to get involved but can't quite look away. Renata put her phone on the desk, screen up, confirmation number visible. "The reservation is under Renata Oseboting," she said, her voice the same temperature it had been since she walked in. "My grandmother's name is Comfort Oseboting. She stayed in this inn every summer for 11 years. The room I booked is the same one she always booked, the Ridgeline Suite." Something shifted in Sterling Voss's face. "Not much, not enough. I understand, but—" "The motel 15 minutes east," Renata said. "Is that what you'd say to anyone who walked in here with a confirmed reservation? Or just to me?" He didn't answer that. Of course he didn't. Renata had driven 4 hours from Ottawa to get to Ashgrove, a small town in the Kawarthas that sat on a lake the color of a nickel when the clouds came in. The Ashgrove Inn had been there since 1962. Fieldstone exterior, wrap-around porch, a dock that jutted out over the water with 2 Muskoka chairs. At the inn that her grandmother had claimed as personal territory every July, Comfort Oseboting had first come to Ashgrove in the summer of 1989, the year she and her husband moved to Canada from Accra. They'd been visiting a colleague of her husband's who lived near the lake, and Comfort had walked into the Ashgrove Inn on a Tuesday morning, ordered tea, and sat on that dock for 2 hours. She came back the next summer, and the one after that. Alone, mostly after Renata's grandfather died. She'd called the inn her thinking place. The one spot in the world where she could sit and let things settle. She'd died 14 months ago, in November, at 81 years old. Peaceful, her daughter said. In her sleep, which Renata had always thought was both the kindest and the most incomplete thing you could say about a person. Renata had inherited a lot of things from Comfort. Her wide forehead, her habit of pausing before speaking, the way other people pause before stepping into cold water, and, as of 7 months ago, the Ashgrove Inn itself. That was the part Sterling Voss didn't know. The inn had been sold 3 years ago by its previous owner, a retired schoolteacher named Gerald Foss who'd run it for decades, to a property group based in Toronto. The property group had sold it 8 months later, the way investment groups do. Quietly, efficiently, to whoever had the capital and the interest. Renata, who worked in commercial real estate and had been sitting on a small inheritance and a very specific piece of her grandmother's advice. Buy things that last, buy things that matter, had bought it. She hadn't announced herself. She'd hired a general manager, done 2 property visits, incognito to check on operations, and planned to introduce herself properly this weekend. A quiet handshake, a staff meeting, a walk through the books. She'd done it this way on purpose. Because she'd learned, working in an industry where she was often the youngest and one of the very few black women in the room, that there was enormous value in watching how people behave when they don't know who you are. Sterling Voss had just given her quite a demonstration. Back at the desk, he had recovered his composure in the way of a man who believes composure is the same as being right. "I'm happy to call the motel for you," he said. "Make sure they have availability." "Don't bother," Renata said. She pulled out her wallet, not her credit card, a business card, cream stock, simple font. She placed it on the desk face up. Renata Osei-Boateng, Osei Property Group owner, Ashgrove Inn. Sterling Voss looked at it. He looked at her. He looked back at the card. The couple by the fireplace had stopped pretending they weren't listening. The young man with the laptop had closed it. "I've been meaning to introduce myself," Renata said. "I've been the owner for 7 months. I've been on property twice before today and no one recognized me, which was helpful actually. Gave me a chance to see how things run." She picked up the card, tucked it back in her wallet. "Today has been very informative." Sterling Voss's face had gone the color of old chalk. I apologize," he said. "I didn't. There must have been a miscommunication." "About what exactly?" He didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one that would hold. "The reservation is real," Renata said. "The Ridgeline Suite. I'll be needing the key." Here's the thing about moments like that one. The man behind the desk had made a decision in about 4 seconds. 4 seconds to look at Renata and decide what category she belonged in and what she deserved based on that. 20 years in a role like his, and apparently nothing in those 20 years had interrupted that reflex. That's not just one man's bad morning. That's a habit that goes unchallenged long enough to start feeling like instinct. The key came quickly. His hands were not entirely steady when he handed it over. Renata thanked him. She meant it, in the way you can mean something and still know it changes nothing about what just happened. She pulled her suitcase to the elevator, pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The Ridgeline Suite was exactly as she'd imagined it from the photographs. Wide windows that looked out over the lake, a sitting area with 2 armchairs angled toward the view, a writing desk in the corner. On the bed, a handwritten welcome card from the housekeeping team. Small things. Done right. She made a note. She put her suitcase down and stood at the window for a while. The lake was that nickel color. Clouds had come in from the west. Out on the dock, the 2 Muskoka chairs sat empty. She thought about comfort, sitting in one of those chairs in July, a cup of tea going cold, on the armrest, because she was too busy watching the water to drink it. She thought about what it meant to inherit a place. Not just the deed, not just the building, but the particular feeling a place holds when someone you love loved it first. She hadn't told anyone in her family she'd bought it. Not her mother, not her aunts. She'd wanted to know for certain it was real before she said it out loud, the way you hold a fragile thing close before you show it to anyone. She took out her phone and called her mother. "I'm at the inn," Renata said when she picked up. A pause on the other end. Her mother knew what inn. "Mama's? Inn? Mama's Inn." Another pause longer. Then, "How is it?" "The dock is the same. The chairs are still there." She heard her mother inhale, the small, careful kind. She would have liked that, her mother said. "That, you're there." The next morning, Renata came downstairs at 8 o'clock. Sterling Voss was not at the desk. A young woman named Paige was. 20-something, efficient, who smiled at Renata and asked if the room had been comfortable. It was, Renata said. Thank you. She got coffee from the breakfast station and took it out to the dock. The morning was cold the way the Kawarthas are cold in late September. Not bitter. Just honest. The lake had gone silver blue overnight. A pair of loons were somewhere out in the middle, calling back and forth in that eerie two-note way that sounds like a question and an answer that don't quite match. She sat in the left Muskoka chair. Her grandmother's chair, she'd decided. The right one was hers. She had a staff meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock. She'd emailed ahead the night before. The general manager had confirmed. Sounded professional and slightly panicked, which was probably appropriate. There were things to discuss, policies, expectations, how guests are greeted when they walk through the door. She'd be direct about all of it. She always was, but for now she sat with her coffee and watched the loons and let the water do what her grandmother had always said water does. It settles things, if you give it enough time. Sterling Voss resigned before the meeting. He sent an email at 9:47, 13 minutes, before it was scheduled to start. Personal. Effective immediately. Page. Forwarded it to Renata with a note that said simply, FYI. S. Voss has stepped down. I've asked the front desk team to prepare for your arrival at 10. Renata read it twice. Then, she set her phone face down on the arm of the Muskoka chair and looked out at the lake. She hadn't asked for that. She hadn't expected it either, though perhaps she should have. Men like Sterling Voss tend to leave, rather than face the thing they've done. It's easier to walk out a door than to sit across a table from the person you decided didn't belong in the room. She didn't feel triumphant. She wants to be clear about that. Or rather, the story wants to be clear. Because this isn't a story about triumph. It's about something quieter and more durable than that. The staff meeting was 22 minutes long. Renata introduced herself, answered questions directly, shook every hand. Paige, it turned out, had been with the inn for 4 years and knew where every body was buried, metaphorically speaking, and was exactly the kind of person you want running a front desk. Renata offered her the interim management role before lunch. Paige said yes before Renata finished the sentence. That afternoon, Renata went through the property with a notebook. Not doing an inspection, exactly. More like getting acquainted. The kitchen, which was excellent. The garden on the south side that needed attention. The small library room on the second floor, with its 2 leather chairs and its shelf of novels that guests had left behind over the decades, a kind of slow-motion donation that had accumulated into something genuinely lovely. She found on the 3rd shelf a copy of The Stone Angel by Margaret Lawrence with a name written inside the front cover in handwriting and she knew as well as her own. Comfort Ose Boateng, Ashgrove, July 2009. She stood there for a long time, holding it. Her grandmother had left a book here 17 years ago and it had stayed. Not thrown out, not misplaced. Just here, on a shelf, waiting on the chance that someone would come looking. Renata carried it upstairs, set it on the writing desk in the Ridgeline suite, next to her coffee cup and her notebook and the handwritten welcome card from the housekeeping team. Then she sat down and looked out at the lake, and for the first time since she'd walked through those doors the day before, she let herself feel how much she had wanted this. Not the victory of it. The continuity, the thread from Comfort's hand to hers, running across 17 years and still holding. Before she drove back to Ottawa the next morning, she walked out to the dock one more time. The loons were gone. Moved south maybe, the season turning. The lake was still. The Muskoka chairs were damp with dew. She stood at the end of the dock and looked out at the water. Her grandmother had stood in this specific spot, on this specific dock, and looked at this same view, and whatever had been weighing on her had settled, because that's what water does, she'd said. That's what this place did. Renata thought, now it's mine to make sure it does that for everyone. Not everyone who looks like her grandmother. Everyone, full stop. That's not idealism. That's just what the job is. She turned and walked back to the inn, her boots on the dock boards, making the same sound they always have, the same sound they'd been making for 60 years. She had a 4-hour drive ahead. A week of calls and paperwork and next steps. A conversation with her mother that would end with both of them crying, probably, and a book on a writing desk upstairs, with her grandmother's name in it, that she would bring home and put on a shelf where it would stay. Some things you inherit, some things you find waiting for you. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, they turn out to be the same thing.